Nobody's ever started a great story with, so I made a responsible decision. Every legendary story starts with this probably isn't a good idea. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Angry Ginger Podcast, the show where we laugh at life's everyday chaos because, let's be honest, if you don't laugh, you're probably going to end up yelling at someone in the self checkout line. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm glad you're here for episode 2. If you listened to the first episode, thank you for coming back. Seriously, starting a podcast is a little like standing in your front yard and yelling into the neighborhood, hoping somebody yells back. Apparently, a few of you did, and I appreciate every single one of you. If this is your first time here, welcome. Around here, we'll talk about the things that make us laugh, the things that drive us absolutely insane, random stories from everyday life, and every episode will have a brand new Ginger Grievance, where I get to rant about something that's probably way more annoying than it should be. Now, before we get started, do me a favor. If you're enjoying the show, hit follow, subscribe, share wherever you're listening. Leave a rating, tell a friend, share an episode, because that's honestly one of the biggest ways you can help an independent podcast grow. I've also got the website up and running at angrygingerpodcast.com, where you'll find episodes, updates, and the merch is available now too. Trust me, I've got some great ideas that are probably going to make people either laugh or question my sanity. All right, let's get into today's episode. Number 2, I also have a remarkable talent for turning a $20 problem into a catastrophe. This happened back in 2014, not long after I bought my first house. Now, if you've ever bought your first home, you know the feeling. You think you finally got it made. You're walking around like, I'm a homeowner now. I got this. What nobody tells you is that houses have a way of waiting until the paperwork is signed before they reveal all their little personality traits. Mine had one big one. Every winter, the main sewer line would back up. Not every day, not every week, just often enough to ruin your evening. I discovered that if I flushed the basement toilet while the washing machine was draining, my basement turned into a very, very unpleasant water feature. Now, a smart person would have called a plumber. A wiser man would have admitted this is above my pay grade. But I'd helped my dad with plumbing jobs growing up, enough experience to be dangerous. That's a phrase people don't appreciate until they're wrapped in the industry machinery. So I drive over, rent a drain cleaning machine, and naturally, I rent the biggest one they have. Because apparently my thought process was if a little power is good, all the power has to be better. That decision alone should have been a warning sign. I get home, pull the basement toilet, feed the cable into the drain. Everything's going great. 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. Then, thunk, it stops. I remember thinking, there it is, that's the clog. Now, here's where the story goes completely off the rails. Instead of backing it up and working the clog like you're supposed to, I just kept pushing. Apparently, my brain had decided to switch into caveman mode. Cable stop. Push harder. Suddenly, the cable decides it's had enough of my nonsense and starts wrapping around my hand. First, I think, well, that's not ideal. Then it wraps tighter and tighter. Then the entire thing goes into what's called an alligator roll. If you've never seen one, picture an angry steel python trying to become one with your arm. The pain hit instantly. My brain knew exactly what needed to happen. Chris, take your foot off the pedal. Simple, easy. Somehow, my foot and brain were no longer on speaking terms at that point. The machine kept spinning. The cable kept twisting. I'm standing there thinking, well, I guess this is how I lose my hand. Finally, the pain is so bad that it literally drops to my knees. My foot comes off the pedal. The machine stops. I unwrap the cable from my hand. I'm alive. I've still got all my fingers. I stand up thinking, okay, that was terrifying. Then everything goes black. Apparently, my body decided, congratulations on surviving. Now we're going to pass out. I faint, face first into the shower. And here's the part that makes this story impossible to make up. While I'm unconscious, The 30 plus feet of drain cable that's been twisted tighter than the slinky from hell comes exploding out of the sewer line. It whips across the bathroom, smacks the walls, sprays me with everything that had been living inside that sewer pipe. I woke up covered in sewer sludge, laying in my bathroom, wondering what series of life decisions had brought me to this exact moment. You know those moments where you just stare at the ceiling thinking, I probably deserve this. This was one of those moments. Eventually, I cleaned everything up. My hand healed. My pride, well, that took a little longer. Now, you think that would be the end of this story, but it's not. A while later, I decided to post the whole disaster on Reddit's Today I Fucked Up subreddit. I figured maybe a few people would laugh. Instead, the story exploded. And then I get this message from somebody at the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency out of Chicago. At first, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, awesome scam. But it was real. They wanted to use my story for their Allstate Mayhem campaign. So I signed the paperwork expecting maybe enough money to buy Christmas presents for the kids. Maybe $500 if I was lucky. Instead, they handed me a check for $5,000 just to get started. Then my story became part of a national contest. People were literally voting on my DIY disaster. My name, my picture, my sewer catastrophe. It was everywhere. By the time royalties and everything else were finished, that incredibly stupid decision made me about $25,000. So apparently, the moral of this story is this: sometimes doing it yourself is a terrible idea. Sometimes hiring a professional would have been much cheaper. And every once in a while, your absolute worst day turns into the funniest and most profitable story you will ever tell. I still don't recommend testing that theory. You know what's funny about that whole story? At no point did I ever think that I was making a bad decision. And that's the crazy part. Every terrible decision starts out sounding perfectly reasonable in your head. I don't need to call a plumber. I can save a couple $100. I feel like my dad did this before. How hard could it be? Famous last words. Seriously, I think every great story starts with one sentence: watch this. Or, I've got an idea. And neither of those have ever ended well for me. And what's really funny is that we all do it. Every single one of us. It doesn't matter if you're 21 or 71. You convince yourself that this situation is going to be different. Yeah, I know people get hurt doing this, but I'm smarter than that. No, no, you're not. You're just the next person in line. And honestly, I think overconfidence is one of the funniest parts of being human. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You stand at the bottom of a ladder thinking, I don't need someone to hold it. 5 minutes later, you're laying in a flower bed wondering if your neighbor saw the whole thing. Or you move a couch by yourself because asking for help seems like more work. Then you're halfway up the stairs with a slip disc, questioning every life choice you've ever made. We've all been there. And if you're sitting there thinking, not me, oh, you're probably the worst offender. Now let's throw peer pressure into the mix. Because sometimes it isn't even your idea. You've got that one friend. Every group has one. The guy who says things like, dude, it'll be fine. Or, it's not peer pressure, it's just your fucking turn. You should never trust someone whose entire argument is trust me. That's not evidence. That's a warning label. And somehow, those are the people we listen to. Why? Because nobody wants to be the person who says, we've all, you know what, guys? I think we should make responsible decisions today. Nobody's ever said that before ending up in a viral YouTube video. Instead we convince ourselves everything's going to work out. What's the worst that could happen? Can we retire that phrase? Because life hears that question as a challenge. Every single time you ask, what's the worst that could happen? Life responds, hold my beer. But here's the thing: as awful as these moments are when they're happening, they're almost the same stories that we tell the most. Think about it. Nobody gathers around a bonfire and says, let me tell you about Tuesday, everything went exactly according to plan. Nobody really wants to hear that. The stories we tell for years are the disasters, the vacations where the car broke down, the camping trip where it rained the entire weekend, the Thanksgiving where somebody set the turkey on fire, that DIY project that somehow ended up with a trip to the emergency room. Those become family legends. My sewer story, I wouldn't have chosen to live through it again, But now I'll tell that story 100 times. Heck, it literally paid for itself. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe embarrassment has an expiration date. When something first happens, you're mortified. A year later, you're laughing. 5 years later, you're adding dramatic pauses to sound effects. 10 years later, it's one of your favorite stories because it reminds you that life isn't perfect. And thank God it isn't. Because perfect is boring. Nobody remembers perfect. We remember the disasters, the mistakes, the moments that made us laugh until we couldn't breathe. So now I want to hear from you. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done because you were just a little too confident? What's the project you thought you would take 20 minutes to fix and ended up costing you an entire weekend? What's that moment where you ignored that little voice in your head saying, maybe don't do this, and immediately regretted it? I know every one of you has at least one, probably more than one. Shoot me a message through the website, send me an email, leave a comment on whichever social media post you found this on. I genuinely want to hear them. Because if my humiliation can entertain thousands of people, yours can too. Misery loves company, and apparently podcasts do too. All right, it's time for another Ginger Grievance. This week's grievance that I'd like to talk about, ghosting. Now, before anybody gets defensive, this isn't a man versus woman thing. Everybody does it. Men do it too, women do it. Apparently, we've all collectively decided that disappearing is easier than having a 30-second conversation. Now, for those of you who've been married for 20 years, first of all, congratulations. Second, let me explain what's going on now. Imagine applying for a job. You send in your application, the company emails you. You have a great interview. They tell you everything looks promising. And then they say that they'll be in touch. And then nothing. No rejection, no explanation, no thanks, but we went in another direction. Just gone. Like they entered the witness protection program. That's dating now. As someone who's recently found himself back in the single world in his 40s, let me tell you, it's a completely different planet than it was 20 years ago. When I was younger, if somebody wasn't interested, they'd usually tell you. Maybe it stung a little, but at least you knew where you stood. Now, you'll have 3 days of great conversations. You're making each other laugh. You're talking about favorite movies, sharing pictures of your dogs, planning to grab coffee. Then you send a message. You see those little dots pop up and disappear. Then nothing. A day goes by, 2 days, a week. At some point, you stop wondering if they're busy and start thinking, well, I guess they died. Because that's honestly the most logical explanation. Now, don't get me wrong. Nobody owes anybody a relationship. Nobody owes anyone a date. And nobody should feel pressured to keep talking to someone they're not interested in. That's completely fair. But would it really kill us to say, hey, I don't think that we're a good match? I wish you the best. That's it. One sentence. It probably takes less effort than crafting a perfect disappearing act. And here's the funny part, ghosting doesn't just happen after one message anymore. People will talk for weeks. You'll have actual conversations, inside jokes, maybe even a date or two, maybe spend the night together. Then poof, like you accidentally matched with Batman. I swear, modern dating apps should have status updates. Last seen 3 days ago. Currently active. Avoiding accountability. And let's be honest, the worst part isn't even being ghosted. The worst part is the detective work your brain starts doing afterward. Like, did I say something weird? Was it the joke about the sewer snake? Did I use too many emojis? Was it because I admitted pineapple belongs on pizza? Well, don't get me wrong with that one. I actually hate that. So would never use that as a topic. You replay every conversation like you're reviewing security footage after a bank robbery. Maybe the reality is pretty much simpler. Maybe they met somebody else. Maybe they weren't ready to date. Maybe life got busy. Maybe they just changed their mind. And you know what? That's okay. Changing your mind is allowed. Just don't leave people wondering if their phone stopped working. I think that's what bothers me the most. Not the rejection, the uncertainty. Because most adults can handle hearing no. What we can't handle is trying to solve a mystery that has no clues. Although I will say this, as frustrating as ghosting is, it does save you from wasting time on someone who can't have an uncomfortable conversation as an adult. Maybe that's the silver lining. If someone can't send a simple, respectful message now, they probably weren't going to magically become a great communicator 6 months into a relationship. Still, to everyone out there in the dating world, can we make one small agreement? If you're not interested, just say so. Be kind, be honest, then everybody gets to move on. No guessing, no overthinking. No wonder if you accidentally offended someone because you said you prefer real maple syrup over pancake syrup. Life's complicated enough. Dating doesn't have to feel like you're trying to solve a cold case. That's this week's Ginger Grievance. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been ghosted? Or, and be honest, have you been the ghost? Send me your stories. The funniest ones might just make it into a future episode. Just don't ghost me after you send them. All right, before we wrap things up, I've got a brand new segment that I want to try. I'm going to call it Quickfire. Here's how it works. You ask the questions. I give you the first answer that pops into my head. No scripts, no overthinking, no politically correct corporate answer, just my honest opinion. Which, depending on the question, may or may not get me into trouble. Nothing's really off the table. Ask me about music, movies, road trips, food, dating, motorcycles, life, work, things that drive you crazy. Or hit me with one of those completely random questions that starts with, would you rather? Those are usually the most fun. So here's what I need from you. Head over to angrygingerpodcast.com and send me your questions. You can also message me on any social media that you follow me on. The funnier, the weirder, the more thought-provoking, the better. Every episode, I'll grab a handful of your questions and answer them right here on the show. If your question makes me laugh, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to use it. So don't hold back. Let's see what you got. Now, before we close, I want to throw something out there. Earlier, I told you about my infamous plumbing disaster, the one that somehow turned into an Allstate commercial. Now it's your turn. I know I'm not the only one who's ever looked at a situation and thought, yeah, I can handle that, right before everything went spectacularly wrong. So I want to hear your stories. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done because you were just a little too confident? What's that DIY project that turned into a complete disaster? What's your hold my beer moment? Maybe you ignored that little voice in your head that was screaming, this is a terrible idea. Maybe you actually got away with it. Or maybe, like me, you ended up with a story you'll be telling for the rest of your life. Head over to the website, angrygingerpodcast.com. Send me a message there or on any social media and tell me about it. The funniest, craziest, and most unbelievable stories might get featured on a future episode. Who knows, maybe your disaster becomes the next legendary story everyone gets to laugh about. And unlike me, hopefully yours doesn't involve 30 feet of sewer cable and a trip to the shower. Well, that's going to do it for episode 2 of the Angry Ginger podcast. Now, first off, thank you for hanging with me. I know you've got a million different podcasts, playlists, and videos fighting for your attention, so the fact that you spent part of your day with me, it really does mean a lot. If you laughed today, cringed a little at my plumbing disaster, or found yourself thinking, yep, I've done something just as dumb, then I hope you'll come back next week because we're just getting started. And don't forget, I need your help to make this show even better. Send me your DIY disasters, your hold my beer moments, the stories your friends and family still won't let you live down. I also want your quick fire questions. Anything goes. Funny, serious, ridiculous, thought-provoking. If it's a question, send it my way. You can do all of that over at angrygingerpodcast.com or reach out on social media. I read every message, and there's a good chance you'll hear your story or question on a future episode. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, do me a favor. Hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. Leave a rating and a review if your app lets you. And if you know somebody who could use a laugh, or someone who's made an all-time terrible decision, send this episode to them. Word of mouth is still the best way to help a new podcast grow, and I can't do it without you. So until next time, try not to rent industrial plumbing equipment without knowing what you're doing. Think twice before saying, it'll be fine. And remember, today's disaster might just become tomorrow's best story. I'm Chris. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.